I will say entrepreneurship teaches you how to build a system. Philanthropy teaches you why those systems must serve people. Greatest inheritance we can give to the next generation is not wealth, but the values that guide how they use it.
Hello and a warm welcome to a very special podcast, Unusual Suspects. I'm your host, Gaurav Choudhary. This is a series about unraveling stories of entrepreneurs, investors, professionals, and of course, philanthropists who are disruptors, yet not in your face. Their disruptions have consistently delivered on the purpose and the mission they've embarked on. Their values are as strong as their mission. Unusual Suspects streams on Earshot.in, Spotify.com, Apple Podcasts, YouTube Podcasts, Moneycontrol.com, and a host of other podcast streaming platforms and directories. Welcome to Season 5 of Catalyzing Change, the Power of Philanthropy, a podcast series in collaboration with GivingPi, India's first family-focused philanthropy network. This season, we're exploring the philanthropic story of the Indian diaspora, a community of over 35 million people whose relationship to giving is changing in ways that are both measurable and meaningful. Indian American giving alone has reached an estimated $4 to $5 billion in 2024, tripling over just 6 years. But these numbers, remarkable as they are, tell only part of the story. We are just as interested in the motivations. Systems change orchestrators, such as Dasra, are seeing diaspora donors increasingly giving more personally from a sense where they came from, what they were shown, and the values they have inherited. The Indian Philanthropy Report 2026 tells us that 76% of diaspora donors gave to what the report calls historical causes like education and healthcare. And yet the most sophisticated givers in this generation are doing something more than sustaining those priorities. They're formalizing them, building institutions around values that may have been transmitted first in their childhoods, at kitchen tables, in the examples of the parents. This is what today's episode is all about, where the money goes, but also where the decisions to give come from, and what it takes to translate something as intimate and personal as inherited values into something as accountable and structured as a philanthropic foundation. My guest for this episode grew up watching her mother do something that was, by any benchmark, remarkable. Dr. Leela Mehta became the first gynecologist in the state of Rajasthan. She began to go into the villages and give free medical checkups to women who would otherwise have had none. Rashi Mehta grew up in that lived example before she went on to build a career in finance and organizational leadership, and then co-founded Rahi Systems, a global enterprise information solution provider where she was foundational in growing it from Silicon Valley startup into an international tech company until its acquisition. Over time, she honed her expertise in philanthropy through programs such as Stanford PSES and the Center for Strategic Philanthropy. She serves on the board of Make-A-Wish Foundation, Greater Bay Area, and in 2024, she founded the Iron Lady Foundation, an organization that serves women and girls, providing access to healthcare, education, and everyday necessities. The name itself is a tribute to her mother. What I want to explore with Rashi today is the journey between two things, from watching her mother work to building an institution in her honor that serves the same demographic. That journey from inherited values to formal philanthropy is one that many are currently navigating. Rashi, welcome to the show. Delighted to have you here.
Thank you so much, Gaurav, for having me here. It's my pleasure to be in your podcast.
Let's go back a few years and find out what the motivation was, what motivated you to do all that you have done and continue to do. Your mother was the first gynecologist in Rajasthan. She worked with vulnerable women who had no other access to medical care, and that is remarkable if you look back at those days. That's an extraordinary thing to grow up around. You had a front row seat and you saw the changes and the transformation that she was catalyzing. And more so when you consider the times back then, which was very different from the times that we live in currently? When did you start feeling the calling that this is something that you probably need to do, scale it up to a different level in a different form, shape and size, of course? What drew you to this decision of wanting to carry forward her legacy, Rashi?
It's a very good question, but when you grow up and around something extraordinary, you don't always recognize it extraordinary at the time. For me, it simply feels like watching my mother go to work every day like any other mother goes to work. My mother, Dr. Leela Mehta, was the first gynecologist, as you mentioned before. What stood out was how she participated in medicine. She would regularly go into the village, conduct free medical camps for women who otherwise have no access to healthcare. I remember seeing her in the camps, and I used to accompany her because I was a single child. So after schools, whenever she used to go for free camps, I used to accompany her and see a lot of women waiting for hours just to see her. At the time, I did not fully understand the magnitude of what she was doing, but those experiences stayed with me. When you grow up watching these service every day, you don't think of it extraordinary. You just understand that helping others is the way of life. Later, when I moved to United States and built my career in Silicon Valley, those early lessons stayed with me. Living abroad actually depended on my connection with India and values with I grew up. For many years, my philanthropy was informal. I supported a lot of projects and causes when it's needed, and I was supporting it from last, I can say, 10 years. Over the time, I realized that if I want to create a sustainable impact, it needs to be more intentional and structured. So when you ask me, growing up watching her, it was nothing extraordinary that time. It was inherited that giving back to society is your job, like it's a daily routine for you.
Wonderful to listen to this story, and something that you have carried forward a legacy with remarkable elan. My next question is something that's quite at the heart of this episode. There's a particular kind of difficulty in turning something personal into something institutional. There are individuals who want to do something, and there are certain legacies that they want to carry forward, but going on to build it at an institutional scale and giving it the shape and size of an institution is something that requires a very different kind of approach, attitude, and of course effort, which is something that you have demonstrated. When you set up the Iron Lady Foundation, what were some of the choices you made to turn those values into formal, structured giving? Because the act of giving, it requires a lot of other elements to it. It is not just going and giving at an individual level. When you're giving it at an institutional level, it requires a very, very different approach. Where did you see some challenges in that translation, Rashi?
You're absolutely right, Gaurav. There is a shift when something deeply personal becomes institutional. When you're giving as an individual, the decision can be very normal. I don't have to think so much, but when you build a foundation, you have to think about governance, sustainability, and a long-term impact. One of the first things I did was step back and ask where we could make the most meaningful difference. That's what led us to focus on healthcare, and my most favorite is education and everyday necessity for women and girls. Because everyday necessity is important, as a lot of girls don't come to school because of those reasons. These areas may seem basic, but they are incredibly powerful. When women have access to healthcare, education, the benefit extend far beyond the individual, which is why I pursued program at Stanford, which you mentioned in the beginning. Those experiences helped me. Because personal compassion can change a moment, but structured philanthropy can change generation. Of course, building a foundation also comes with challenges, especially doing it across the world. But our guiding principle has remained very clear, ensuring that women and girls have access to opportunity that can reshape the future. They started trusting me, believing in me, and understanding that no, I can change something. And in fact, building some of the water pumps or the toilets or some buildings or some infrastructure for them, give me a trust, and I have to come in their shoes and understanding what are their problems. And doing that had made a big change on my thinking and the project which I lead in India.
Rashi, let's take a step back. Let's talk a little bit more about your background. And you co-founded Rahi Systems, and you have got a professional background in finance and organizational leadership at a global level.
Mm-hmm.
Over time, you honed your skills more specifically in philanthropy. How did your professional background in finance and organizational leadership help with building the Iron Lady Foundation as an institution? And how has it since affected positively, of course, its trajectory? So what are the strengths that you drew from your professional background that you brought into philanthropy in the form of Iron Lady Foundation? Rashi.
My professional background played a big role in shaping how I approached building this foundation. Co-founding Rahi System taught me how to think about building organization from the ground up. I don't know you guys know or not. Rahi System was a bootstrap company. I literally started from my garage. How to create a system, establish a governance, and think long term. In many ways, those lessons translated it naturally into philanthropy. When you're building a company, you're always thinking about sustainability and scale. That's what we do. When I started Rahi, we were only 2 employees, and from 2 to 4,000 plus employees, and from one country to 35 plus countries made a big difference in my thinking as well. The same thinking applies to build a philanthropic institute. I will say entrepreneurship teaches you how to build a system. Philanthropy teaches you why those systems must serve people. But philanthropy also requires a different mindset. In business, success is often measured as quickly through number and growth. In social impact, change can take years, sometimes even generations. So I had to balance those 2 perspectives.
You touched upon a very important point, and which is, about the perspective that your professional background brought in and gave you, and how you built Rahi Systems from a 2-person organization into 4,000 employee organization with footprints in more than 30 countries now. You're doing this work from abroad, particularly the philanthropic work. The Indian Philanthropy Report 2026 tells us that diaspora givers are moving from capital remittances, which is previously it was all about sending money back home in the form of philanthropy, to increasingly giving their time, networks, and expertise. And that's a fundamental shift that is now quite noticeable. Having said that, however, diaspora engagement remains concentrated in a handful of geographies and a handful of causes or areas like healthcare and education primarily. Women's welfare, for instance, is not yet where the bulk of the diaspora philanthropic capital has come in. You have a view from staying outside India and about the act of giving in the philanthropic network in India from outside. So what does that, from looking at it from a distance, add to your philanthropy? And what would it take for more philanthropists to give more towards gender equity, particularly? Rashi?
Living outside India creates a unique perspective, I will say, Gaurav. Distance does not weaken responsibility. Sometimes it makes you see it more clearly for me. Diaspora philanthropy can bring together capital, network, and global expertise. We have those opportunity to connect the ideas and resources across board, and we have done that in Iron Lady. At Iron Lady, we try to stay very close to communities we support by working with strong local partners who understand and realize on the ground. When it comes to gender equality, I believe it is still underrepresented in a diaspora giving, partly because the issues are structured and often less visible. But the evidence is clear. When women have access to healthcare, education, and opportunity, entire community benefit. When women have access, and when the woman gets opportunity for her family, she can change and move mountains. That is why I believe investing in women is not charity. It is one of the most powerful development strategies we have. And I will say, doing the Dr. Leela scholarship will make a big change, because with Mentor, they need sponsorships also.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, this brings me to my next question about the Indian diaspora is undergoing an intergenerational transition, and that is quite noticeable now. And that has been for some time now, in fact. Wealth is being passed down along with values, priorities, and philanthropic identities. It's not just about wealth moving on from one generation to another, so far as the diaspora is concerned, but also the philanthropic values and the institution building in that space. What do you think are some of the biggest lessons for both? Now, this generation of givers, if you may call them the now-gen givers, who are passing down these systems, and the next gen who are receiving them, so that they can strengthen the giving without diluting their purpose and value systems, because purpose and value systems are the strongest pillars of any philanthropic act. Rashi?
For me, legacy are not meant to be copied. I will say it again, that legacy are not meant to be copied. They are meant to be carried forward in a new way. For families thinking about intergeneration philanthropy, or one of the most important thing is exposure. Young people should have a chance to see communities, understand the challenges firsthand, and participate in decision. Women also play an incredible important role in shaping these traditions. My mother showed me that leadership and compassion that coexist. And as I think about next generation, including my daughter, I hope to pass on not just an institution, but a mindset. I'll give you a simple example for my household, that right now, my daughter, she is 12-year-old, but she already have this mindset that she have to save, spend, and share. So she will make sure that she still at the age of 12 start contributing for the next generation kids, because ultimately greatest inheritance we can give to the next generation is not wealth, but the values that guide how they use it. Gaurav.
Rashi, I want to end this with a larger question. It is about a specific milestone that India set itself, the ambition of becoming a developed nation by 2047, the goal of Viksit Bharat, and the goal of Viksit Bharat by the centenary year of India's independence. What does this ambition mean to you personally? And what will it take for India to truly be Viksit, while ensuring it does not leave behind some of its most vulnerable communities? Rashi?
I love this question, Gaurav. I left India 25 years back now, but the vision of India becoming a developed nation by 2047 is incredibly inspiring. India has already undergone remarkable transformation over the past few decades, which I see by myself whenever I visit India. Through our work, we often see the gap between India's economic progress and many women who are still lack access of healthcare, education, and opportunity. If India truly wants to achieve its ambition by 2047, gender equity must be central to that vision, because a truly developed nation is not defined only by its GDP, but by whether its most vulnerable citizens have a dignity and opportunity. And I want to create this opportunity for the women in the villages and the girl child. My hope is that by 2047, organizations like Iron Lady and other organizations which are doing the similar work will have contributed to creating an opportunity for women and girls so that they can participate fully in shaping India's future. After all, India's future will be strongest when every girl has chance to shape it.
Very well said. And that's a great note to end this conversation. Thank you so much, Rashi, for taking the time out and dropping by to have this conversation with us and sharing your deep insights and perspective on a range of issues. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Gaurav.